June 5th, 1944, 10:47 p.m., German 91st Infantry Division Headquarters, Normandy. General Lieutenant Wilhelm Falley sat in his command post reviewing intelligence reports about Allied invasion preparations. As commander of the 91st Air Landing Division, ironically named, as it was designed specifically to counter Allied airborne operations, he'd spent 2 years studying American and British paratrooper tactics. His assessment unimpressive. These American airborne divisions, he told his staff over evening schnapps, are propaganda units. Elite soldiers jumping from aircraft sounds impressive in newsreels, but operationally? He shook his head dismissively. Paratroopers land scattered, disorganized, without heavy weapons. They have perhaps 2 hours before they're overrun by conventional infantry. The Americans have 3 airborne divisions, 82nd, 101st, and the newly formed 17th. They waste elite soldiers on circus tricks. His intelligence officer nodded agreement. The Sicily drop was disaster. Half the American paratroopers landed in ocean or scattered across countryside. They achieved nothing significant. The Salerno drop was only marginally better. American airborne operations consistently failed to achieve objectives. Exactly, Falley continued. Paratroopers are expensive to train, require specialized equipment, consume aircraft needed for other purposes. For what? To land infantry in wrong locations without artillery or armor support? We could defend Normandy with conscript infantry and achieve better results than Americans achieve with their elite paratroopers. What General Lieutenant Falley didn't know, what German intelligence had catastrophically failed to understand, was that at that exact moment, 13,000 American paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were boarding 820 C-47 transport aircraft in England. In exactly 7 hours, they would drop into Normandy in the largest airborne operation in history. And General Lieutenant Falley would be dead within 18 hours, killed by American paratroopers he dismissed as circus performers. The man leading one of those paratrooper units was Lieutenant Richard Winters, 26 years old, Easy Company, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division. He'd trained for 2 years for this moment. He'd memorized his objectives. He'd said goodbye to men who wouldn't be coming back. In 7 hours, he would drop into darkness over France and lead his scattered company in destroying German artillery positions that threatened the entire D-Day landing operation. The Germans thought paratroopers were waste of resources. They were about to discover that 13,000 elite soldiers dropping behind their lines in darkness was nightmare from which they couldn't wake. To understand German dismissal of airborne forces, you need to understand their military doctrine, conventional warfare emphasizing armor, artillery, and massed infantry. German military doctrine in 1944 reflected lessons from 5 years of war. Heavy weapons win battles. Tanks, artillery, machine guns, these decide engagements. Infantry without heavy support are vulnerable. Elite training doesn't compensate for lack of firepower. Concentrated force beats dispersed force. Mass your strength at the decisive point. Dispersing forces, like dropping paratroopers across a wide area, violates the basic principle of concentration of force. Logistics determine capability. Soldiers need ammunition, food, water, and medical supplies. Paratroopers carry limited supplies and rely on airdrops that can be intercepted. They're logistically vulnerable. Airborne operations are high risk, low reward. Germany had pioneered airborne operations with Fallschirmjäger, paratroopers, in 1940 to 1941, but after costly operations in Crete, 1941, Hitler banned large-scale airborne drops. German conclusion: airborne operations cost more than they achieve. This doctrine shaped German intelligence assessments of Allied airborne forces. German intelligence reports 1943 to 1944, September 1943. Sicily Operation Analysis. American 82nd Airborne Division drop was catastrophic failure. Aircraft scattered by weather and anti-aircraft fire. Paratroopers landed across 60-mile area. Many drowned when dropped over ocean. Units took days to assemble. Achieved minimal objectives. American airborne capability assessed as overrated. February 1944 Italy Operation Summary. British and American airborne operations at Salerno and Anzio showed marginal improvement but continued fundamental problems. Units landed scattered, required extensive time to organize, lacked heavy weapons to hold objectives. German counterattacks consistently drove paratroopers from positions. Assessment: airborne operations are high cost, low effectiveness tactics. May 1944, Normandy defensive planning. Allied airborne divisions may attempt drops in Normandy to disrupt defenses. However, German Fallschirmjäger experience in Crete demonstrates that airborne operations suffer unsustainable casualties when opposed by prepared defenders. Recommendation: position mobile reserves to counterattack landing zones within hours of drop. Scattered paratroopers can be eliminated before they organize effective resistance. General Feldmarschall Erwin Rommel, commanding German forces in Normandy, was more cautious in private assessment. Allied airborne divisions represent potential threat if used properly. However, their operations in Mediterranean showed poor execution. If they drop in Normandy, our greatest advantage will be their inevitable dispersion. Paratroopers landing scattered in darkness will be vulnerable for critical first hours. Mobile reserves can destroy them piecemeal before they consolidate. But even Rommel's cautious assessment underestimated what was coming. While German officers dismissed airborne operations as failed experiments, American planners were perfecting techniques that would revolutionize warfare. The architects were Lieutenant General Matthew Ridgway, 82nd Airborne, and Major General Maxwell Taylor, 101st Airborne, with overall command by Lieutenant General Louis Brereton, 1st Allied Airborne Army. American Airborne Doctrine, 1944. Vertical envelopment. Don't attack fortified positions frontally. Drop behind them, seize key terrain, disrupt enemy communications and logistics. Accept initial disorganization. Scatter is inevitable, but trained soldiers can self-organize and execute the mission even without a formal command structure. Small unit initiative. Every soldier knows the overall plan. Small groups can achieve objectives without orders from higher command. Mission type orders. Tell soldiers what to accomplish, not how to do it. Trust their training and initiative. This doctrine addressed the exact problems German intelligence identified, but turned them into advantages. American Airborne Force Structure, June 1944. 82nd Airborne Division. Strength, 13,000 soldiers. Regiments, 504th, 505th, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiments. Commander, Major General Matthew Ridgway. Motto, All American. Combat experience, North Africa, Sicily, Italy. Physical requirements. Top 10% of Army physical fitness. Mental requirements, above average intelligence scores. Training duration, 12 to 16 weeks jump school, plus 8 to 12 weeks unit training. Parachute jumps required, 5 minimum for qualification, 20 plus for combat veterans. Dropout rate, 60% didn't complete training. Pay, $50 per month extra. 50% more than regular infantry. Equipment innovations, T5 parachute. Descent rate, 18 feet per second. Reliability, 99.7% versus 97% for earlier designs. Reserve chute, standard. German paratroopers had no reserve. Deployment altitude, 400 to 500 feet. Minimize time exposed to ground fire. Pathfinder teams, drop 30 minutes before the main force. Equipped with Eureka radar beacons and colored lights, marked drop zones for following aircraft. Success rate, variable, but provided some guidance even in poor conditions. M1A1 carbine. Weight, 5.5 pounds versus 9.5 pounds for M1 Garand. Folding stock, designed for paratroopers. Magazine, 15-round detachable. Range adequate for close combat, shorter than Garand but lighter. The combination of elite selection, intensive training, innovative equipment, and aggressive doctrine created a force unlike anything the German military had encountered. June 6, 1944, 12:15 a.m. over Normandy. Lieutenant Richard Winters stood in the door of a C-47 transport aircraft, watching tracers arc through the darkness below. A red light glowed beside the door. Next to him, 17 men from Easy Company waited, each carrying 80 to 100 pounds of equipment, parachute, reserve chute, weapon, ammunition, grenades, rations, water. The plane shuddered as anti-aircraft fire exploded nearby. The pilot took evasive action, banking hard. Behind Winters, Private Hall vomited from the combination of fear and motion sickness. Green light. Go! 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 Winters jumped into darkness at 500 feet, moving 150 miles per hour. parachute opened. Violent snap as risers caught, then relative silence. Floating down toward France, tracers still arcing below, sounds of battle already beginning. He hit the ground hard, rolled, came up with weapon ready. Alone in a French field at night behind German lines, with scattered gunfire in all directions, exactly as training predicted. Around him, across a 25-mile drop zone, 13,000 other American paratroopers were having similar experiences. D-Day airborne drop, 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. Aircraft, 822 C-47 transports. Paratroopers, 13,000. Drop zones, 6 designated areas behind Utah Beach. Drop time 12:15 a.m. to 2:15 a.m., June 6, 1944. Conditions: dark, cloud cover, heavy anti-aircraft fire. Pilot experience, many pilots' first combat mission. The drop was chaos, organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Actual drop results: paratroopers landing in designated drop zones, 35 to 40%. Paratroopers landing within 1 mile of drop zone, 60%. Paratroopers landing more than 5 miles from drop zone, 20%. Paratroopers killed in drop, 300 plus. Aircraft shot down, drowned in flooded areas, killed on landing. Aircraft shot down, 21. Aircraft damaged, 200 plus. By German doctrine, this constituted disaster. Scattered forces, heavy casualties, units unable to concentrate. But American doctrine anticipated this. Every paratrooper carried a device called a cricket, a brass clicker that made a distinct sound. Click, click in darkness. If friendly, click, click response. If no response, enemy. Within minutes of landing, scattered paratroopers were finding each other. Within an hour, ad hoc units of 10 to 30 men were forming, often mixing soldiers from different companies, different regiments, even different divisions. Private John Steele, 505 PIR 82nd Airborne, landed on a church steeple in St. Mare Église, parachute caught on spire. He hung there playing dead while battle raged below, was captured by Germans, escaped hours later, rejoined unit. His experience was extreme but not unique. Paratroopers landed everywhere, improvised, kept fighting. While scattered across Normandy, American paratroopers had specific objectives that were critical to D-Day success. 101st Airborne Division objectives: secure 4 causeway exits from Utah Beach, required for armor to move inland. Destroy bridges over Douve River, prevent German reinforcements from south. Capture Sainte Marie du Mont, key town behind Utah Beach. Protect western flank of invasion. 82nd Airborne Division objectives: capture Sainte Mare Église, first French town liberated, critical crossroads. Destroy bridges over Murderet River, prevent German armor from west. Secure La Fière Causeway, required for Allied advance. Protect western flank of invasion deeper inland. The most critical mission fell to Easy Company 506 PIR 101 Airborne. Easy Company mission: Brécourt Manor. Objective: destroy German 105mm artillery battery firing on Utah Beach. Battery location: Brécourt Manor, fortified position. German strength: 50 plus soldiers, 4 105mm guns in entrenchments. American strength: 13 men, all that could be assembled from scattered Easy Company. Time available: morning of D-Day, guns already firing on landing forces. Lieutenant Winters found himself with ad hoc force. 13 men from his company, most of whom had landed miles from drop zone. Normal procedure would be to wait for more forces, but the guns were firing. American soldiers were dying on beach. Winters made decision that would become case study in small unit tactics. Brécourt Manor assault, June 6, 1944, 8:30 a.m. Winters led assault with 13 men against fortified position. Flanking approach through hedgerows. Suppressive fire from base element. Assault element rush at first gun position. Captured or destroyed gun. Repeated for remaining 3 guns. Used captured grenades against Germans. Entire action lasted 90 minutes. Results: all 4 guns destroyed. German position neutralized. German casualties 15 plus killed, unknown wounded. American casualties 1 killed, 2 wounded. Ammunition expanded, considerable, resupplied from dead Germans. Across Normandy, similar small unit actions were occurring simultaneously. German commanders woke to nightmare. Reports flooded in from across Normandy. Paratroopers everywhere. Communications cut, roads blocked, small unit actions disrupting movement. Confusion and chaos. German situation reports. June 6, 1944, 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. 0214 hours. Paratroopers reported landing near Sainte-Mère-Église. Strength unknown. Request reinforcements. 0247 hours. American paratroopers have cut telephone lines across sector. Radio communication unreliable due to terrain. 0318 hours. Sainte-Mère-Église occupied by American airborne forces. Counterattack being organized. 0445 hours. Reports of paratroopers across entire area. Exact locations unknown. Units experiencing difficulty moving due to demolished bridges and road obstacles. 0612 hours. American artillery firing from Brécourt Manor has ceased. Unknown why. Cannot reach forward positions for report. 0723 hours. General Falley missing. Last seen departing headquarters for forward inspection. Vehicle found abandoned. Bodies of escorts recovered. General presumed killed by paratroopers. The death of General Lieutenant Falley, the officer who dismissed paratroopers as circus performers just hours earlier, symbolized German command confusion. He'd driven into American paratroopers who shot him at a checkpoint. The general who commanded a division designed to counter airborne operations was killed by those operations in the first hours of the invasion. General der Artillerie Erich Marx, 84th Corps commander, attempted to organize counterattacks, but found his forces paralyzed. Telephone communications, cut. Radio communications, spotty. Road movement, obstructed by demolished bridges. Unit locations, uncertain due to paratroopers behind lines. Intelligence picture, completely unclear. The American paratroopers are everywhere and nowhere. Marx reported to higher command. We receive reports of paratroopers in dozens of locations. But when we send forces, we find small groups that evade or fight delaying actions. We cannot determine their main strength or their primary objectives. They have created chaos out of their own dispersion. This was exactly what American doctrine intended. By end of D-Day, June 6, 1944, the airborne operations had achieved strategic success despite tactical chaos. D-Day airborne results, June 6, 1944, end of day. 101st Airborne Division. Causeway exits from Utah Beach, all four secured, critical objective achieved. Bridges over Douve River, destroyed, prevented German reinforcements. Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, captured. Western flank, secured. Casualties, 1,240 killed, wounded, or missing, 9.5% casualty rate. 82nd Airborne Division. Sainte-Mère-Église, captured and held, first French town liberated. Bridges over Murderette River, most destroyed or held. Lafayette Causeway, contested but eventually secured. Western flank, secured deeper inland. Casualties, 1,259 killed, wounded, or missing, 9.7% casualty rate. Strategic impact. Utah Beach landing. Success, partly due to airborne securing exits. German reinforcements, delayed 6 to 12 hours by demolished bridges and chaos. German command and control, disrupted throughout critical period. Western flank security, achieved, allowing invasion forces to consolidate. The casualty rates, roughly 10%, were high but not catastrophic. More importantly, the missions were accomplished. Colonel S.L.A. Marshall, U.S. Army historian who interviewed participants immediately after battle, concluded, "The airborne drop scattered forces across 25 miles. German doctrine said this meant failure. American doctrine said this created opportunities. Small groups of highly trained soldiers operated independently, achieved local objectives, and collectively accomplished strategic mission. The Germans spent D-Day fighting shadows, never knowing where main American strength was, never able to concentrate forces effectively, always reacting to threats from unexpected directions. But D-Day was just the beginning. Airborne divisions were lightly equipped infantry divisions designed for 48 to 72 hours of operations before being relieved. Instead, they fought in Normandy for 33 days. Normandy Campaign, Airborne Divisions, June 6th to July 9th, 1944. The 82nd and 101st remained in line, fighting as regular infantry. Duration, 33 days of continuous combat. Reinforcement, none. Divisions fought with D-Day strength minus casualties. Heavy weapons, limited to what could be airdropped or captured. Opposition, German infantry, armor, and artillery. Terrain, bocage, hedgerow country. Ideal for defense, terrible for offense. Private Don Malarkey, 101st Airborne, described the experience. We were elite paratroopers trained for quick strikes behind enemy lines. Instead, we spent 5 weeks fighting in hedgerows like regular infantry, except we didn't have the artillery support or tank support regular infantry had. We had rifles, machine guns, and whatever we could scrounge from Germans, and we kept fighting because that's what we were trained to do. Accomplish mission regardless of circumstances. Casualties, 33 days in Normandy. 101st Airborne, 4,670 casualties, 36% of division strength. 82nd Airborne, 5,245 casualties, 40% of division strength. Total, 9,915 casualties in 33 days. Both divisions were withdrawn in July 1944, sent to England for rest and refit. They'd proven airborne concept. They'd secured D-Day success. They'd paid heavy price. But German commanders had learned painful lesson. September 17, 1944. Operation Market Garden, the largest airborne operation in history, larger than D-Day. Operation Market Garden, Airborne Forces, 34,600. American 82nd and 101st, British 1st Airborne, Polish 1st Independent Parachute Brigade. Objectives: seize bridges across Netherlands, create corridor for armored advance into Germany. Distance 64-mile corridor from Belgium to Arnhem, Netherlands. Duration planned 48 hours, actual 9 days. The American Airborne Divisions performed their mission successfully. 101st Airborne. Objective: secure 15-mile stretch including bridges at Eindhoven and Veghel. Result: all objectives achieved within 48 hours. Casualties: 2,110, 16% casualty rate. 82nd Airborne. Objective: secure bridges at Grave and Nijmegen. Result: all objectives achieved. Nijmegen Bridge captured after bitter fighting. Casualties: 1,432, 11% casualty rate. But British 1st Airborne at Arnhem, the farthest objective, was surrounded and destroyed after heroic resistance. Operation Market Garden failed because ground forces couldn't advance fast enough to relieve Arnhem. The operation revealed both strengths and limitations of airborne forces. Strengths: could seize objectives rapidly, hold against counterattacks, operate independently. Limitations: still lightly equipped infantry vulnerable to armor, needed relief within 72 to 96 hours. March 24, 1945, Operation Varsity, Rhine River crossing, the last major airborne operation in Europe. Operation Varsity. Lessons applied. Drop zones selected close to objectives. Learning from D-Day scatter. Dropped in daylight, better navigation and assembly. Coordinated with ground forces advancing simultaneously. Heavy air support provided, fighters suppressing anti-aircraft. Gliders brought in artillery and vehicles addressing firepower gap. Results: objectives, all achieved within 6 hours. Link up with ground forces, achieved in less than 24 hours. Casualties, 2,700, 17% casualty rate, high but mission successful. Strategic impact, successful Rhine crossing, advance into Germany. By March 1945, airborne operations had evolved from experimental to proven doctrine. The Americans had conducted major airborne operations in North Africa 1942, Sicily 1943, Italy 1943 to 1944, Normandy 1944, Southern France 1944, Netherlands 1944, Germany 1945. Each operation refined tactics, improved coordination, reduced casualties. Behind the operational successes were soldiers who paid a price for proving the airborne concept. Lieutenant Richard Winters survived Normandy, Market Garden, and the entire war. He led Easy Company through some of the fiercest combat of the European theater. After the war, he struggled with what would now be called PTSD and survivor's guilt. In an interview decades later, he said, We were elite soldiers, best trained infantry in the American Army. But elite doesn't mean invulnerable. I watched friends die in Normandy, good men who'd trained for 2 years for that moment. Training kept most of us alive, but it couldn't save everyone. I think about the men who didn't come back every day. Private Don Malarkey survived but lost close friends throughout the campaign. In his memoir, he wrote, "People see airborne soldiers as heroes, and maybe we were. But we were also just kids, 19, 20, 21 years old, jumping out of airplanes into gunfire because that's what we were told to do. I'm proud of what we accomplished, but the cost was high, very high." General Lieutenant Wilhelm Falley died June 6, 1944, killed by American paratroopers at a checkpoint. He was 55 years old, an experienced officer who commanded a division specifically designed to counter airborne operations. The paratroopers he'd dismissed as circus performers killed him in the first hours of the invasion he'd prepared months to repel. Total American airborne casualties of World War II, 82nd Airborne Division. Combat jumps, 5. Days in combat, 442. Casualties, 15,590. 119% of authorized strength reflects replacements. Killed in action, 3,456. 101st Airborne Division. Combat jumps, 4. Days in combat, 477. Casualties, 16,270. 125% of authorized strength reflects replacements. Killed in action, 3,585. 17th Airborne Division. Combat jumps, 1. Provided an option for crisis response before heavy forces arrived. Created strategic flexibility. Power projection. Nations with airborne capability could threaten multiple locations simultaneously. Forced enemies to defend everywhere, diluting their strength. Elite force concept. Airborne divisions pioneered all-volunteer elite units with intensive training. Model for Special Operations Forces developed later, Rangers Special Forces SEALs. Days in combat, 45. Casualties, 2,790, 21% casualty rate in short period. Killed in action, 430 bay. The casualty rates were significantly higher than regular infantry divisions, a testament to the intensity of combat airborne divisions experienced. Airborne operations in World War II revolutionized military doctrine permanently. Pre-war doctrine. Infantry advances frontally against fortified positions. Breakthrough requires overwhelming force and heavy casualties. Deep operations require armored spearheads supported by logistics. Post-war doctrine. Vertical envelopment can bypass fortified positions. Airborne forces can seize key terrain rapidly, creating chaos in the enemy rear. Combined arms operations integrate airborne with armor and conventional infantry. The revolution extended beyond tactics to strategic thinking. American military theorist Russell Weigley wrote in 1967, "The airborne divisions of World War II proved that elite forces of highly trained soldiers can achieve effects far beyond their numbers." A division of 13,000 paratroopers on D-Day created chaos across a 25-mile front, paralyzed German response, and secured critical objectives. This was warfare transformed not by technology primarily, but by training, doctrine, and aggressive use of vertical envelopment to bypass enemy strength and strike at vulnerability. Saint-Mère-Église, France, June 6, 2019. 75th anniversary of D-Day. Veterans, families, and dignitaries gathered at the memorial in the town square, where John Steele famously hung from the church steeple in 1944. Among attendees was Tom Rice, 97, veteran of the 101st Airborne who jumped on D-Day, Market Garden, and Varsity. For the 75th anniversary, he insisted on making a commemorative parachute jump at age 97. Also present was Werner Kortenhaus, 95, former German soldier who fought against American paratroopers in Normandy. Through translators, they spoke. Model for Special Operations Forces developed later, Rangers Special Forces SEALs. "I was 20 years old on D-Day," Werner said. "My commanders told us American paratroopers were poorly trained, would land scattered and confused, and would be easy to defeat. Then you came out of the sky everywhere at once. We couldn't respond effectively because we didn't know where your main force was. You were everywhere. Rice nodded. We were scattered. That was the plan, or at least we made it work. Every small group accomplishing local objectives created the chaos that paralyzed your response. We were trained to operate independently, to improvise. Scattering us didn't defeat us. It made us more effective in some ways. My officers never understood that, Werner replied. They kept trying to find your headquarters, your main body, your concentration of force. They were looking for conventional battle. You gave them something different. Our doctrine was different, Rice agreed. We weren't trying to fight fair. We were trying to create chaos behind your lines, disrupt your response, and buy time for the landing forces. It worked because your commanders didn't expect infantry to operate the way we operated. Before the ceremony ended, Werner approached the memorial wall and placed a single white rose for the American paratroopers who died here. You were brave soldiers. We just didn't understand what we were fighting until too late. Rice placed his original jump wings from 1944 beside the rose. For the men who didn't make it home, and for the Germans who fought honorably. You were brave too. We were just on opposite sides. The story of American Airborne Divisions in World War II is ultimately about how innovation defeats conventional thinking, how elite training multiplies force effectiveness, and how underestimating your enemy's capabilities guarantees defeat. German officers mocked American airborne divisions because German doctrine said scattered light infantry without heavy weapons couldn't achieve strategic objectives. German experience in Crete seemed to prove this. Airborne operations were costly and ineffective against prepared defenses. But Americans didn't copy German airborne doctrine. They revolutionized it. Accepted chaos as feature, not bug. Scatter was inevitable, so doctrine embraced it. Small unit initiative meant scattered forces could still achieve objectives. Mission-type orders over detailed plans. Every soldier understood the overall mission and could improvise rather than waiting for orders from higher command. Elite selection and intensive training. Only the top 10% were physically and mentally qualified. Training created soldiers who could operate independently under extreme stress. Combined arms integration. Airborne operations supported conventional operations rather than operating independently. D-Day paratroopers secured flanks for the beach landing. Learning from failure. Each operation refined doctrine. Sicily lessons applied to Normandy. Normandy lessons applied to Market Garden. Continuous improvement. The results spoke for themselves. Strategic impact. D-Day. Airborne drops secured the western flank, achieved all objectives, enabled successful invasion. Market Garden. American airborne achieved objectives. Operation failed due to British failure at Arnhem. Rhine crossing. Airborne drop enabled successful crossing with minimal casualties. Tactical innovation. Vertical envelopment became standard doctrine. Small unit tactics revolutionized infantry operations. Elite all-volunteer units became a model for special operations. Force multiplication. 26,000 paratroopers on D-Day created effects equal to multiple conventional divisions. German forces tied down, defending against threats from unexpected directions. Chaos in German rear areas prevented effective counterattacks. Modern legacy. Every modern military with power projection capability maintains airborne forces. US 82nd Airborne remains a rapid deployment force. Airborne doctrine evolved into air assault, helicopters, and special operations. Training methods pioneered by World War II Airborne became standard for elite units. General Wilhelm Falley sat in headquarters on June 5, 1944, dismissing American paratroopers as circus performers wastefully deployed. 18 hours later, he was dead, killed by those same paratroopers who dropped behind his lines in darkness. His death symbolized German failure to understand what they faced. Germans saw scattered light infantry. They didn't see doctrine that turned scatter into advantage, training that created soldiers capable of independent operations, and aggressive use of vertical envelopment that bypassed German strengths to strike at vulnerabilities. Lieutenant Winters jumped into darkness over Normandy with 17 men from Easy Company. He landed alone in a field, gathered scattered soldiers, and led a 13-man assault against a fortified German position with 4 artillery pieces firing on invasion beaches. His small unit action saved American lives on Utah Beach and demonstrated exactly what German commanders had failed to understand. The most dangerous enemies aren't always the ones with the heaviest weapons or largest armies. Sometimes they're elite soldiers falling from the sky like a storm, creating chaos out of dispersion, and achieving objectives through initiative and training rather than firepower and mass. German officers mock at American airborne divisions. Those divisions secured D-Day success, enabled the Rhine crossing, and revolutionized warfare. The mockery ended when 13,000 paratroopers fell from the sky over Normandy, and German commanders realized too late that they were fighting something they didn't understand. Sometimes the most devastating attacks come from above. Sometimes elite training defeats conventional forces. Sometimes innovation defeats experience. The lesson remains: never mock your enemy's elite forces. They might be elite for reasons you don't understand until they're behind your lines. Achieving objectives your doctrine says are impossible. Winning battles by changing the rules. German officers mocked. American paratroopers jumped, and warfare was never the same.